Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today we're going to look at one of my full water culture Phalaenopsis orchid. I have about 10 orchids in full water culture, and this is one of the ones that I converted from the beginning of this year. And this video is basically an update video to show you how it's doing. And this is the photo of this orchid from earlier this year. And the flowers were in light green, and I think the name for this particular cross is called Phalaenopsis green Pixie. And in Chinese, it has another pretty interesting name. They actually call it the green fairy. So it basically has very light apple green tinge to it. It's not fragrant. It's one of those very common Phalaenopsis complex hybrid that you can find in grocery stores or garden centers. But nonetheless, it was still giving me a very good show, and all the flowers lasted for quite some time, and overall it was just a very enjoyable orchid to look at. So after the bloom had finished, I basically wanted to give this orchid a repot, and based on the root system that I saw at the time, I decided to give it full water culture method. And it lost a couple of roots along the way, but around April, early April, mid-April, it started to put out green growing root tips. So this orchid was responding finally to the water culture method, and so far it's looking pretty good. And this video clip here was also taken around mid-April this year, and you can see there are lots of green growing root tips. At the time of this video, as you can see, there is no water. And because I like to, even though it's full water culture, from time to time I would dump out all the water just to allow the orchid to dry, because my experience anyway, full water culture, even though you do full water culture and roots are soaking in water for many days in a row, or maybe up to 7 days at a time, but occasionally you really should give it a break. Allow the roots to dry, and then sometimes if there is a little bit of rotting, this dry period would also allow it to stop the rotting, and sometimes the roots would scab, right, and it will heal, so that way the root would not continue to rot further upwards. And here, this is another clip. And this is the water level that I usually give to this orchid even until this day. It's a little bit less than 1/3 of the roots, which is the general rules for full water culture. You want to leave about bottom third of the root in water. But for me, I really think that if the roots are working, right, even if you just give it 1/8, for example, or 1/5 of the roots in water, it would still pick up enough water for the entire plant. So it doesn't really have to be every single root in water, and 1/3, even though it's the general rule, but I don't think that is the requirement. So this is the level that I usually give to this orchid even until today, and so far this orchid is responding to full water culture very, very well. This orchid is actually a mid-sized orchid. It's not a miniature, but it's not the big white Phalaenopsis type of large jumbo-sized orchid either. So mid-sized orchid, but if you look at the root system, it has some good roots, but the root system isn't all that great yet. So I've only been giving it very moderate amount of fertilizer because it doesn't have that much root system. So my focus for this orchid is still to help it produce as many roots as possible. So with this orchid, I go between reverse osmosis water and liquid seaweed solution. And in fact, I think this one receives more liquid seaweed than the regular orchid fertilizers that I give to other orchid, because the focus that I have for this orchid is to help it grow more roots quickly, because once the root systems are established, I know this orchid will continue to thrive in this method, and I'm hoping that it will continue to grow more. But the next clip that I'm gonna show you, this one is right now what you're seeing is a clip from I think mid-April, and then I think a month or a month and a half after, I took another video clip, and here it is. You can see there is much more root system, significantly a lot more than the clip that you just saw earlier. So the liquid seaweed actually worked well, and between the liquid seaweed and the moderate amount of fertilizer I gave it once a month really, and it's only quarter strength of recommended dosage. It grew lots of roots, so now you see how the water level is still pretty low, because that's how I like it for full water culture orchids. But a lot of its roots are still pretty hydrated. Occasionally, when I notice that my environment's humidity is really low, I do use a sprayer and kind of just from the base kind of spray into the cup to allow some of the roots above water to get a little bit of additional moisture. But I really only do that maybe once a month. Whenever I see that the humidity level is pretty low in my environment. So that's what I do. Otherwise, I keep the water level low, and I do dump out the water, once a week, just to allow additional roots to dry, to make sure there's no more rotting or no more root issue. Basically, I just want the roots to have a break. And now this is probably mid to late August that I took the photo. You can see it's growing a new leaf, and the last leaf that it grew out is really big, right? The latest two leaves are doing really well. The newest leaf is growing at a really fast speed, and the big leaf that you see here grew out under my care in full water culture. So I think this orchid is on its way to full recovery from the root loss. And hopefully in the fall, it'll spike for us to enjoy its flower. And this is just another picture of its previous bloom. I really like the color, light green, very, very light green in the background, and it's just lovely to look at. 以上就是今天为您带来的影片。如果你喜欢这个影片，请帮我在影片的下面点个赞。如果你要继续与我一起学习怎么养兰，别忘记订阅我的频道并打开通知铃铛。谢谢您的观赏，我们下次再见。